I had been living with my parents for quite a while, and we were searching for a new house to rent. It seemed like every place we saw wasn't quite right, or there was always something off about it. But after a long search, my dad finally found a house that seemed perfect. It was very close to my school and the neighborhood was nice. The house itself was beautiful, but there was just one thing that bothered me. There was an abandoned house right behind it. Now, I'm usually not the type to get scared easily, and I don't believe in supernatural things like other kids. But this abandoned house felt strange. It looked old, dark, and somehow mysterious. The worst part was that my room was at the back of the house, and from my window, I could see the full view of that eerie building. "Mom, Dad," I said reluctantly one evening, "I really don't like this room. The window faces the abandoned house. Can we switch rooms?" "You know how hard it was to find this place, right?" my dad responded. "You're going to have to get used to it. You have a nice room. It's not a big deal." I wasn't happy, but I tried to let it go. Days passed and I slowly started adjusting to the new room. My fear began to fade, but one night, something strange happened. It was around 9 p.m. and I was getting ready for bed when I glanced out my window. Something caught my eye in the window of the room on the upper floor of the abandoned house. Someone was standing there, just staring out. My heart skipped a beat. At first I thought it was my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something. I kept staring, but the figure didn't move. I was frozen with fear. "Mom, Dad," I called out, running to their room. "What's wrong, sweetie?" my mom asked, opening the door. "There's someone in the abandoned house," I exclaimed, trembling. "Honey, it's probably nothing," she said calmly. "It's late, and your imagination is running wild. There's no one there." But I could have sworn I saw someone, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The next night, I tried to ignore it, but again, I saw the same figure in the window. Mom, there's someone there again," I cried out. "Sweetheart, it's just your imagination. You've been watching too many scary movies," she said. But I was sure it wasn't my imagination. The next day, I decided I would get to the bottom of it. I wasn't going to let this go. I told my parents I was going to explore the abandoned house, and they didn't take me seriously. At night, around 9 p.m., I gathered my courage and decided to go into the abandoned house. I was determined to figure out who or what was haunting that window. I slipped out of my room, took a deep breath, and walked toward the house. When I entered the abandoned house, it was completely dark. I could barely see anything, but I was determined to find the source of my fear. The silence was deafening as I slowly climbed the stairs to the room where I had seen the figure. When I reached the top, I pushed open the door to the room, but there was no one there. I stood in the center of the room, feeling an odd chill. It was completely empty, just a dusty, dark room with a window that overlooked my house. Suddenly, I heard something from behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing. The air felt thick, and I could feel something was off. It wasn't just the house, it was something else. Out of nowhere, the door slammed shut. I rushed to open it, but it wouldn't budge. My panic began to rise. I kept pulling and tugging at the door, but it was locked. Just then, I heard something. Footsteps behind me. I whipped around, but again, there was nothing. My breath became shallow as I realized the room felt colder, as if the air was alive. Something wasn't right. That's when I saw her, a woman standing in the corner, staring at me with hollow eyes. I screamed, and in an instant, I bolted toward the door. This time it opened easily. I didn't care about anything else. I ran back home, heart pounding in my chest. When I got back to my room, I locked the door behind me and tried to calm myself. The figure had been real. The house was haunted, and I wasn't just imagining things. The next morning, I woke up feeling nauseous, but I tried to ignore it. I went downstairs where my parents were having breakfast. I felt uneasy all day, and when I tried to go to school, I couldn't make it. I was too scared, too shaken up. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized what had happened. My mom and dad were trying to comfort me, but I could see it in their eyes. They were concerned about my behavior. My mom kept talking about things from my childhood, but there was something off about the way she spoke. Suddenly, I had a realization. The woman I had seen, the one in the abandoned house, she was not just anyone. She looked just like me, only it wasn't me. It was the spirit of someone who had been trapped in that house for years. And then it hit me. The abandoned house wasn't just haunted, it was where a terrible tragedy had taken place many years ago. The spirit that haunted that house had been using my form to get close to my family, trying to claim them as its next victims. Terrified, I knew I had to act fast. My parents didn't believe me yet, but the more they observed, the more they realized something wasn't right. That night, as I prepared to leave the house once and for all, I knew I had to do everything to escape. The next morning, I overheard my parents talking about leaving the house and moving away. And so they did. We left the haunted house behind, never to return. It wasn't until we were far away that we found out the history of the house and the terrible fate of the woman who had once lived there. A woman who had died mysteriously, but whose spirit had never left. I was lucky to have escaped before it was too late.